So, from that standpoint, so, fill up with coffee, whatever, so you're stuck with me for the next little while here, so don't, from that standpoint. So, but like with any presentation, please ask the questions as we go through, those kind of things. That's what I'm gonna start with nanoparticles, and gonna ask Servant to give a little presentation, and then I'll come back on Calcine and wrap up with kind of pulling it all together in the program approach. So nanoparticles, this is technology, it's about 10 years old, about the same as what Calcine is. Nanoparticles is a delivery mechanism. Steve kind of covered some of it when he went through a little bit of it, but I'll go into a little more detail from that standpoint. So, all right. So, technology is great until it doesn't work. So, from that standpoint, okay, and it's not moving because it's been open too long. So, there we go. Finally. Oh, all right. So it looks like this either died on me or something here. So from there. All right. So the problem is stains on a shirt. When you have nano, it's a delivery mechanism. It'll run right off onto the ground because it won't absorb from that standpoint. That's what this does from there. So if you're looking at some of these different problems that are there, 100%, pest control or less than 100%, reapplication, nutrient immobility, limited yield, lodging, fruit set. What these types of products do basically is they're carbon silicate particles. So they fill and will give you a delivery mechanism. So these are like driving a bus onto a plant instead of driving a car singularly out there from that aspect of it. So, yep, if you don't mind, thanks. So, put that one aside, see what we can do here. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, so how small is nano? Okay, nanos are between an antibody and a virus. Okay, this is not a coronavirus, it is just a virus. Okay, looks exactly like it. When I started giving this presentation, 2019 and 20, that's what we were dealing with. So from there. But these particles are extremely small lava rocks, basically, is what they are. Okay, and they are both conventional and organic. So this gives us the opportunity to deliver. But these are only a delivery mechanism. This is just taking fertilizers and bringing them to the ions of fertilizers, so K and P and calcium and silica and all of these different aspects, and being able to deliver them from that standpoint. So we have somewhere in this area between 10 and 100 nanometers in size. So when you have a nanoparticle that's say 50 nanometers in size, and you have glyphosate that's 2 nanometers in size, that means we can load that up with 25 ions of glyphosate, okay, and deliver that to the plant in one fell swoop. This is why we want to put, if we're going to spray glyphosate with Nano Pro, we load it into the glyphosate so it'll load up, actually bring them in. And then when we're delivering that to the plant, we actually have that abilities to gain more efficiencies with the glyphosate. But if you're doing this with urea, UAU solution, that same 50 nanometer particle can load with 150 actual nitrogen ions and deliver to a plant. Okay, so this is what's critical. When we put them in with Liquid Plus, or became Liquid Plus, when I was first asked about it, it's like, this isn't going to do anything, okay? Because there's no nutrients in Liquid Plus per se, okay? There's enzymes and proteins and the dead bodies in carbon. So what's it going to assist? Well, it's the other aspects coming out of the compost that's brought in, and it's the enzymes that's part of that process that delivers Liquid Life Plus. That's why it works so well. We've been able to reduce it by up to 50% and get the same reactions out of the plant and soil. So basically, Steve went through some of it, but you have these porous silicon nanoparticles. They're exchanged and put with a electrical charge. They're put into water along with the nutrients to create these abilities of being able to move the nutrients. So it's the magnet concept. Positive ion, drop in a negative ion fertilizer, and boom, you've got it loading up, okay? When you do glyphosate, you have that abilities of this same thing, except you're doing it in the glyphosate solution. It's loading it up, okay? Then once you put it on the plant, then basically it's the endocytosis that occurs. So we've all had the thing where you've gotten a sliver in the end of your finger, okay? It's there. All of a sudden you look again, it's gone, okay? The body absorbed it, realizes it's not a food source, not something I want, pushes it back out, all of a sudden it reappears a few days later, okay? That's the same concept as what's here, except here we're bringing in carbon, we're bringing in these aspects. So again, what's the 3 most important nutrients to raise a crop? What's the 3 most important nutrients to raise a crop? Okay?
Carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen.
You got it. Okay, chop. Right? Carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. Yeah, go ahead.
Question, so phosphorus, is that particle too large to be attached to a nano?
No. P2O5 is too large. P is not too large.
Okay.
Okay? So that's the thing you get into. P2O5 is what is basis of MAP and DAP and triple and all of that. That's too large. Okay, because there's 5 oxygen tied to a phosphate.
Because you'd avoid all that tie-up problem if it's attached to a nano, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So when we can put this with a rock phosphate for you and dissolve it and put a Omni Pro in, we can then up the level of phosphate into the plant.
Okay.
Okay? But we have to break it apart using a water solution thing. If I'm doing nanophos on the other side, then it is what is ability to be able to deliver that phosphate to the plant and take it out. Again, rock phosphate is 030 in the organic world. It's still 24% phosphate. It's still what all MAP comes from, DAP comes from. Everything comes from rock phosphate. All glyphosate comes from rock phosphate. Okay? Because again, glyphosate, glufosinate, both have phosphate in. That's why when we want to load up the nanoparticle with glyphosate, we try to get it with we've learned to get it with the glyphosate. So when it gets into the calcium water, it's already tied to a carbon. You heard Steve talk about nutrients tied to a carbon. Then it is able to be delivered to this plant and not get tied up by calcium.
When you add Nano Pro, for example,
Yep.
to glyphosate,
Mm-hmm.
how much agitation does it really take for it to, let's say you put it in a keg,
Nothing.
256 gallons, how much agitation do you really need?
None.
None.
Pouring it in and letting the nanoparticles disperse, and they will basically do it. When you put it in your injection on the go,
Yep.
there's really no need. It'll load within a few seconds with the glyphosate
Because of the electrical charge?
because of the different electrical charges that are there. Okay?
But you're suggesting to do it prior to.
If that ability is there to do it, Gary, it just saves time and saves energy from that standpoint. Okay? From that. Where I'm getting at is these have a slight electrical charge to them. Nano Pro does. Opposite of glyphosate, so they will load up with the glyphosate molecule. then it can't get grabbed by calcium. Okay, so that's part of it. Why do you put ammonium sulfate in water when you spray chemical to soften it, right? What's softened water? Calcium's tied up, so it can't grab the next. So when you put ammonium sulfate in, what grabs it? The sulfur and the ammonium become calcium nitrate or calcium sulfate. So all of a sudden you've got those in the spray water, and it just stops that ability of that to grab the glyphosate. That's why glyphosate can work better. Okay, but as Gary and I have had many conversations, and Daryl too, okay, just improving the glyphosate doesn't necessarily mean we're going to control all the weeds every time. Okay, we still have to look backwards. So from there, you have to look back. Okay, and say, if I've got a bad weed issue I've got to control, step back 2 years and figure out how I can get this under, what other crops can I grow to help get this under control so we can not get it from here. Okay? All right, so when you get endocytosis, it's brought in, and then the plant can open up and actually move those nutrients or chemicals into the plant from that standpoint. Okay? So the old way of doing this is Steve went through. It's osmosis or diffusion, which means you have more on the outside than you do on the inside. So the nutrient moves through the membrane wall because there's more laying on the leaf and there's less in the plant, so it'll move through. That's how plants take it out. And this doesn't matter if it's the leaf, this is just a membrane wall. So this is a root, this is whatever. If there's more out here than there is in the plant, and it wants it, it'll move it through these membrane walls. Active transport, you've got a cuticle break, you've got the, you have the stomatas, you have those aspects of it, and what it does is you spray it on, it moves through these cracks, those kind of things. So when we're going after Lynn, we're just, this is basically when you cut the alfalfa, you get really high end up active transport into alfalfa. When you have a hailstorm, you have cracks in the leaves, you have cracks in the stem, that's high active transport. So you can get a lot of nutrients in very quickly if you don't shut the plant down, okay? Endocytosis, once we get it on there, the plant grows around it, creates a sac, makes sure it's okay, and basically then moves this right next to the xylem to be able to move the nutrients from that standpoint. Now we start going back to diffusion. This particle sitting here, say this is the wall to the xylem, it'll now start to push this way because there's more on this side than there is over here. Okay? Then the nanoparticle will empty, and if it's in the soil, it'll start to reload. Okay? It'll start to pull boron, it'll start to, if it's a positive charge, it'll start to pull boron to it. It'll start to do it. This is porous silicate, the highest CEC in the world. Okay? So it's that particles have the highest CEC, well over 100. So you can imagine how much can be brought back to it right there. If it's in the plant, once you work it back down, it'll go back into the soil or it gets washed off. If it's shoved back out, once it's empty in the plant, it'll shove it back out. It'll get washed into the soil. Okay? Because it doesn't need it anymore. Just like that sliver was found to not be something it wanted, it'll shove it back out. So we're still learning this technology. It's 10 years old, okay, a little over. But again, it's this Trojan horse concept from there. But endocytosis is the key issue here of how we get this absorption into this plant, how we get it in so quickly. Okay, so, all right, I went through that fairly quickly. Questions on that? Okay.
So,
yep.
I just gotta make sure I understand this. So, once that thing gets into the plant, and it'll disperse the active ingredient, and then it will go and do double duty and start to capture other nutrients?
Yes.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Well, again, it comes down to, it becomes part of the CEC in the soil.
Okay.
Can we 100% prove that, Lynn, by university standards? No. Okay? But I can tell you from my experience of working with this for 8 years that there isn't a time where I put a nanoparticle out and I go do a tissue sample. So we start with a tissue before, tissue after applying, okay? And the guy sitting next to you is one of the guys I've done this with numerous times. We never see a boron decrease in the plant.
So does it grab the bound boron?
It'll grab the bound boron or any boron in the solution from that standpoint. Because this has a stronger CEC than a soil particle does.
Okay.
So sorry, a soil particle will have a 20 to a 30 cation exchange capacity.
Uh-huh.
This has 100 plus. Okay, so it has more pull than anything else. Okay, that's how it can help with holding phosphate. It can help with holding boron. It can help with holding more potassium around that rooting hair from that standpoint. Okay, so the very first time I ever did this was with Del Monte melons. First time we ever used it, saw it. First time I got introduced to it, I looked at Dave Dixon, who is a good friend of mine, another agronomist in the area out in Arizona. And I looked at him and I said, David, you're nuts. There is no way 4 ounces can replace dry fertilizer on some of this. No way. Okay? So then it takes farmers to prove me wrong to make me learn. Okay? That's why Gary, Severin, Lenny, Lynn, you guys have all taught me various things through my career because of this. Okay? Where I'm getting at is then Scott Tollison, who was the farm manager, said, Tom, we're doing a calcine trial over here, and I've got this over here, and now I've got, I'm using, he went from 9 gallons on a melon crop of 1034-0 to 2. Okay, and he replaced it with 8 ounces of nanophos. So he saved himself $21 and replaced it with $14 worth of fertilizer. But the big thing is all of a sudden we added another melon to the plant, okay? Because of the additional phosphate that was getting taken up through this, we got another melon. Well, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, 1 melon, but when you have 6,000 plants per acre, that's 6,000 watermelons, okay? That's a lot, especially at, say, $2.50 a piece. So you've got a $14 decrease, but you now have an increase of over $14,000 in melons. So needless to say, that's why it took off, okay? And once Scott taught me that, then we could start to look at why. And part of that's this CEC that I've learned over the last number of years, and part of it is this ability to get into the plant faster. We didn't learn this until about 3 years ago, truthfully, okay? That's exactly how we were doing it. We just knew we were getting faster. Because, Brad, we had a situation in yours where you had right by your dad's farm, where we had a potassium deficiency in corn because of really dry fall. And we flew crossways across that. We drove, 12 hours to get product that day, okay? But we got it, and we stopped the potassium deficiency basically in its tracks, okay? Within basically 24 to 48 hours. Agreed? I mean, because Don was there, looked at it, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and it made a difference of almost 20 bushels to the acre because we stopped the potassium deficiency from that standpoint, okay? So you have the unloaded products, which is Nano Pro and Nano N. Nano Pro is for the chemicals, protection. Nano N is nano-nutrient, okay? A lot of people refer to it as nano-nitrogen. It's not, it's Nano N. And then you have all of the loaded products, which are using these particles put together so we can then deliver these nutrients to it, okay? And then we do have the unloaded Omni product as well for organic, okay? So, all right, and Gary, yes, I put this up here just for you, okay, from that standpoint, all But anyways, how to apply it basically goes through any. When this was developed, drones weren't even in the thought process. But today, this leads to this technology is a way to get this to work very well, because we can deliver nutrients at 4 ounces where you can't do that with, you know, other aspects of the fertilizer industry. Okay, so that's a part of this whole process. So as this grows apart, that'll make a difference in the future. Okay, I would say right now we're somewhere in that 60 to 80% of the wheat probably is all being flown on in Kansas now is all drone for fungicide, because they want to stop the wheel tracks in it, because it makes about a difference of about 3.5 bushels an acre on wheat. Okay, so at $10 an acre, $12 an acre for application, your additional without running down the wheat makes a big difference from that standpoint. Okay, so this is a technology that's coming, and it's going to replace a lot of the aerial applications from that standpoint in the future, because it's easier to find people to fly these than it is to fly helicopters or airplanes. Okay, so that's what our aerial guys from that. If you want a really inexpensive way to do it, just hire Todd and he'll get up with his ultralight and dump it on himself. Sorry, Todd, I had to pick on you. So
I've seen him fly.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so we add the water conditioning, then we add the crop or whatever the input is, and then we're adding these nanoparticles together with this, and then if we have any surfactants. Okay. So if you take anything away from here, is that Steve put up basically that little chart or the spray thing of when you're going to apply a foliar nutrient of being, you know, 70, early morning dews, those kind of things. Okay, the key issue is making sure you're below that 120 to 125 heat, you know, humidity and temperature together. Okay, but March doesn't count, Gary, because you called me the other day and said, I've got a 120, should I be spraying glyphosate from that standpoint? Because it was 60 degrees outside and 60% relative humidity. So from that standpoint in March, okay? No, we don't have any green matter. But when you're doing this, just kind of keep that in mind that, you know, I've got to try to get out there to get these things done in the heat of it, you know, from that standpoint. Glufosinate is a little bit of a difference because you want heat with it, but again, in order not to burn your plant, just walk your crop oil backwards when you get into that 135, 140 range. And we do get days in that range from that standpoint. Okay, so yeah, so anyway, so mix, load, and deliver is basically the message. So basically it's stable in all ambient conditions, stays stable in for years. So if you actually mix up glyphosate, I've had it mixed up now for 2 years and I've never seen no fallout, no issues, still as active as it was 2 years before that. So won't change the characteristics of salting out or bloating, settling, incompatibilities, they won't change that way, but from there. So basically, as I said, it's these porous silica. Silica is also a nutrient the plant needs. Okay, basically like a fine sand, and basically loads up from that standpoint. Okay, won't fix high water quality or pH issues. Okay, that's why we still have to do surfactants. We still have to understand what our water is, how it works. Okay, won't resist poor soil or resistant pests, and from that standpoint. So Nano-Pro, basically any herbicide, any fungicide, any insecticide, Nano-Pro can be used with it. From that standpoint, just a quick 2-year research here on Versamax and Vicento. You can see on soybeans here, basically picking up basically an ROI of about another $7, $8 an acre by using this, even after the cost of buying the product. Full precision, same thing with Mervius Ace. Neo, we basically picked up almost $34 worth of return from utilizing this from the weed control or from the getting more of the fungicide into the plant. So as you're looking at your Cercospora sprays, this is an opportunity to do that for the beet guys in here from that aspect. Works well. Nano Pro works really well. Omni Pro works really well with the commercial oils that are being used, the cold rolled oils, things like that, that are part of the natural insecticide aspect of it. Okay, so here is, we're now proven by PFR, by Bex. So all of the trials that are there, basically over the time frame, averaged about a $19 return. Same thing here with the another 7 with Lucento over a 3-year time frame. So in reality, what we're proving here is just this abilities of being able to get more into the plant and less from that standpoint. If you're growing dry beans, Nano Pro works very well to stop the burn. So if you're using Reflex or Flex Star, that if you want to reduce the burn, not 100% get rid of it, but reduce it, Nano Pro will do that because we get into the plant faster. We pull it in, the plant gets it in, so it doesn't lay on the outside and have that burn on that leaf. Okay, it goes against thought processes. Carbon gonna make it, less, but it's how fast we can get into the plant. Okay, we have some potato research out of Florida that we ended up pulling in the insecticide into the potato plant within 4 hours, where the actual insecticide took 24 to get in. Okay, got to the same level ultimately after 48 hours, but this one got in 4 versus 24. Okay, so Nano-N, basically looking at UAN with it in this case, but again, 3-year average basically coming up at about a 17. And again, remember, anything I'm talking about here with any of the loaded products or anything is the Nano-N is the same particle. Okay, so it's the same delivery mechanism, and it's the same mechanism that's in Omni Pro as well from that standpoint. Okay, so starter here in 2x2, basically looking at about 7 bushels to the acre. Again, just a lot of different trials that we've done with Beck's Precision from that standpoint. I think I just went by. Yeah, so this was actually part of the Conceal study. So what we've been looking at, so delivery on the nitrogen in a Conceal system around sugar beets, we're actually seeing with any of these nanoparticles, then we're getting that delivery mechanism that much better. So putting it with Liquilife, you're getting these same nanoparticles that's allowing that delivery mechanism of nitrogen in a Conceal. Okay?
You just had a question earlier about increasing the protein content of wheat. Would you be better off putting Nano-N with whatever you decide to put on than you would be a Nano Pro?
Yeah, and you'd be putting your fungicide in with that, Gary, because you're putting it on right at flag or right at flower. So that's why it actually will all work together from that standpoint. Okay? So if you're wanting to drive protein and getting nitrogen into the plant, then this is the type of a product that helps drive that mechanism in.
Would you notice 4 ounces? I mean, would you notice enough in the protein content?
You will. I mean, we've done it in Kansas, and I've seen as much as, 3/4 of a point to a point in protein from that standpoint. Okay?
We tried Coron last year.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to help.
Mm-hmm.
Did you add that to corn?
Coron with this and your fungicide all together will drive that abilities of getting that into the plant. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes. So for $4, you're going to drive, when you're paying 8 to 9 for Coron, this is going to drive it in probably another 30 to 40% into the plant quicker to get it to that flower to be able to raise that protein. Okay. So, yes. And again, if you're already high on protein, don't go
You won't
don't do it,
see
don't
much.
do this, but
Yeah.
you've gotta understand, if you're running low on protein and you wanna kick it up, getting an amino or a coron or some of these in order into that plant.
Well, like last year, we had exceptionally good growing conditions.
Mhm.
We expected a higher yield, I
Mhm.
didn't fertilize well enough.
So you need to do that.
Without getting the discount of
Right.
low protein wheat.
Right. And so what is when you're putting coron on, it's 1.5 pounds per gallon. So if
Yep.
you're putting a gallon down, how much is that equivalent to? From units of nitrogen? 10.5, because you're taking it times 7.
Yeah.
So any of these now, you cannot replace all your nitrogen with these protected nitrogen sources, because as Steve went through, you have to have a certain amount of nutrients for that biology to work with. But if you need to push something, that's where you push it, with any of these protected nitrogen sources. Okay, other questions on that? Okay. So Nano-K is one of the other big ones we use, so you can start to see V4, V5 corn, R1, R3 soybeans. Those are critical growth stages that we've looked at, but basically when you look at almost every one of these crops, we've seen an increase in either yield, forage quality, sugar content, bricks in a couple that we don't grow up here from that standpoint. But, so looking at foliar potassium study for the last 3 years with precision, you can see that our ROI on Nano-K at V5 corn basically is picking up on an average about 6 bushels per acre on corn, and just by testing and by number of kernels on the corn, okay? Because you're picking up sugars, so you're forcing it in. So putting on wheat, on Nano-K on wheat, you can up your test weight, okay? Because you're getting more sugar, more content of nutrients into that plant. So nutrient density becomes a major part of this process. Okay, Nano-CS. So it's the same reason this works so well with sugars, because of that, from that standpoint. Okay, in sugar beets. Because we're pushing more sugar into it. But it takes that 28 days in order to get that in order to do that. Okay? So we can take potassium sulfate, organic potassium sulfate, and move it in with nanoparticles into that same type of a plant. Okay? So we can then start to reduce the levels of other dry spread and so on and so forth. But that's how this is all coming, that what we can see from that, from there. So Nano-CS, again, crop starters, again, lots of averages across, mainly on bushels, but we've been doing a lot of work with wheat, we've been doing a lot of work with up here with sugar beets and all of that to reduce the starters and be able to get a better option for you from that standpoint with Nano-CS. Same with Nano-Pack on dry beans and soybeans, getting this multi-spectrum iron, manganese, copper, zinc, getting them all into that plant is what's a critical piece. Again, easily doing a 4.1 or 4 to 1 return on investment here. We've actually seen better than that in a lot of places from that standpoint. We can get some iron chlorosis on not the worst fields. We can see some better options of putting down 4 ounces of this from that standpoint. Really works well if you're spraying Roundup Ready beans using this, because the 3 major nutrients that Roundup ties up as part of the chelation process are manganese, copper, and zinc. What are the 3 heavy metals that protect your plant? Copper, manganese, and zinc. Okay, so as we spray more glyphosate, this helps protect that abilities of that plant not to give you yellow flash, those kind of things when you're spraying. Okay, from there. So Nano-FE, been a very good product for us. And again, going back to Steve's chart, the study that was done, iron's 100 times more effective being put on foliarly than it is in the soil. Okay, So putting down a heavy dose of soy grain can help there, but in a lot of cases, putting down Nano-Fe over the top can help us if we get it on early enough to stop that early portion of iron chlorosis. Okay, so basically putting in along nano iron with along with the Laro on soybeans basically gave us a 5 bushel bump. When we put it with Nano Pro, no iron, we got a 7.3. So you can see we're getting more in. These particles, these loaded particles that we're talking about, like with Nano-Fe or Nano-K, they still help pull more into the plant. Okay, they're not fully loaded. They're only, say, 60% loaded. So they'll absorb some of the other nutrients that's in it. Okay, so if we're going to spray nano iron and we need to put on a fungicide, we don't need to add Nano Pro. We're still going to do well. We just need to work with that option from there. Okay, so producers' observations basically, we did a skip pass trial with 40 units removed and replaced with Liquid-Life, and we had another one with Pivot Bio. But anyways, we had a 2 to 8% variance in yield between the two in favor of Liquid-Life across the board. Moisture was consistent throughout all the Calcine and nanotechnology passes. Soybeans, Liquid-Life compared to liquid inoculant, we had a 3 bushel advantage. Okay, you saw some of that from Steve's presentation, the nice aspects of it. Wheat sprayed 6 ounces foliar over wheat. Saw stronger stalks and heads with less shatter. Ahead of the combine, yield was about 5 bushels to the acre. Okay, and where this is coming from is that it was the observation of the producer when we did this. Really couldn't see, you could see it on the combine some, okay, but he was like, I don't know, maybe a bushel or 2. But when the regrowth on the wheat came back, it was really thick where we hadn't sprayed CS. And he almost had to plant another cover crop on where he did spray the CS because we didn't get as much shatter. Okay, so you didn't have as many seeds per acre from there. Okay, questions on that? Yep.
So with that naked nanoparticle, has anyone tried applying that to try to harvest the bound elements in the soil that we don't have access to normally?
We have only done a small amount of that on one trial last year, Lynn, from that standpoint.
Did you see anything, or is it too early?
No, we saw it in tissue samples. We saw an increase in basically all the nutrients uptake because we were able to get it around that seed, and then using Liquid-Life with it, we were able to then get the nutrient release, especially on high manure fields. Okay, where you've had, like in your situation, you've had a lot of chicken litter over the years. Okay, Brad, one of the guys that lives out toward Kindred, gets a lot of manure, beef manure. Okay, so from that standpoint, so you don't all have to have livestock. You just got to figure out, be really nice to your neighbors to get some of the manures from that standpoint. Okay, but if you, so yes, we can, Lynn. I can't tell you that it's 100% at this point, but we're repeating trials to see if we can see that from there.
I'm encouraged that because we do see it when you put it on residue. You see immediately how it's capturing the minerals on the residue, biologically digested stover and things like that. So I think my gut is it's going to take a little longer in the soil on residue, but I think you'll see the same sort of thing.
Yeah, we see it really fast on the residue aspect of it. Okay, when we break that down and get the residue from that standpoint.
Then you'd want to do it in furrow or 2 by 2, or you'd want to keep it by the plant, wouldn't you?
If you're gonna harvest it, we want to keep it as close to that seed. So you can either do a 2 by 2 or in furrow. Spraying it over the top could work, but that would take more than what it would really be hard to come up with a way to sit here and say how much more do we actually pick up, okay, from that standpoint, okay. But the encouraging thing that I see with these is that we see a boron increase basically all the time, okay? And so boron is the steering wheel, calcium's the truck, okay? So if I can steer these nutrients in, that's what I want, okay? So if you heard me go through the spray mix for, say if something happens where you're cutting hay or you got damage to a crop, getting boron on that is a critical piece to steer those nutrients into that plant. Okay, you can't overdo it because you'll turn them white in a hurry. So we're not talking about going out and spraying, you know, Hula's gallon an acre at a time of boron here, 10%, you know, boron or whatever. We're just talking about basically a few ounces, 8 ounces to 12 ounces probably max on that type of a product. Okay, so, and if you do that with nanoparticles, where we're doing it here, that's why we have to stay down there. So we had a situation where we sprayed it in Miller, South Dakota, and we turned his beans white for 3 days. So you know, we put down a quart with Nano Pro in it, with the herbicide and fungicide, and we turned the whole field looked like it was a ghost. Okay, because it turned it all white. Calls me, you know, what's going on? You know, did I overdo it? I guess we did. You know, waited 3 days and they were all back nice and green, no issues. Yield was fine. Just turned them white for a few days. Okay, so from there. Okay, so that's why if you have raspberries, okay, and you want to get rid of weeds in raspberries, you spray them with a high dose of boron, and it'll turn the thistles white and start to kill them. Okay, because they'll back off. Some of the weeds will start to turn white. The canes themselves won't turn, but the weeds will start to turn white from there. So that's good old borax laundry soap. Okay, from that standpoint, because that's what boric acid is. So from there, other questions? Yep.
Could you replace Aspire with Nano Pro?
Yes. Yes. Aspire. The Aspire being the
Potash,
pot-
the boron,
Yep.
which is relatively expensive.
Yep. You can start to replace a portion of it, Dale. Maybe not all of it, but a portion of it from that standpoint with the Nano K specifically, and then that allowing more boron uptake from that standpoint. Yeah. Because we can start to lower the levels of potash as we get into understanding where your ground's at from that standpoint. Okay, so when we started working, you had potassium deficiencies quite often on certain crops from that standpoint. Okay, once we've gotten in with Calcine and Liquid Life, in that we basically see no potassium deficiencies, and you're not putting on a lot of potash anymore. Okay, from there. So we've had some questions where, so we're using what's called a TND test now. It's total nutrient digestion. It's a test that tests all nutrients that's in the soil. They use the harsh acids to release these nutrients, so it gives you the total nutrients that's in the soil. So I've done probably a dozen of them in last year, and going to be doing a lot more this year. And basically we're finding about 100 to 125 years of potash in most soils. Okay, that's what you have out there, and that's using half of it. Okay, there's just lots of it out there. It's all tied up. Once we can start to use this to start to show how we can get more available with Liquid Life and through these programs, we're now starting to see how we can start to reduce the level of potash that's needed for various crops. Okay.
So is it just the extract that makes it different from, say, an organic test?
Yeah. Yeah. So they use, like phosphate, they use like an 838 soil. They use the bicarbonate to get the phosphate out of it. Okay. Here they would basically just dump on a pure sulfuric acid, really harsh, to release all the phosphate that they can. Right. Okay. So it's a test that's really just kind of getting started and getting off the ground, like the Haney test and things like that, to look at these options from there. So we talk about CO2. The Haney test gives us that option of being able to sit here and say how good is the CO2 release that's happening from the soil. Okay. So, all right. Other questions? So I'm going to switch out a little bit. Severin, any comments or anything you would want to talk about briefly for a second, so while I switch out, so.
Okay. Well, I wish you had that slide where, 2 years ago, I think, when I was lucky enough to go to Tom and Jim and Darcy down to Nano-Con, they had that slide where they had dyed the whatever they're using the product with whatever infrared dye, and they had 2 different separations there. One was just regular rainfalls going into the plant by diffusion and regular osmosis, and then that other one was going in there that had been treated with the nanotechnologies going through into endocytosis. And it was just like, it was night and day difference. You saw it like a movie going in there, and there was 1 or 2 particles slowly going in the plant the natural way that we've done it forever. And then you saw the nanotechnology, and it looks good on there, but like I say, we've done this for my 5th year now using these products, and it was the same thing. The first time we used the Nano Pro, we did half of a quarter. We did it Saturday night, we went to church next morning, we came back out there, and the 80 acres that we'd used the Nano Pro on, the weeds were completely tipped over, and it was ideal conditions for it, it was unbelievable. So, like I say, Tom said it's a continuing education thing, because it's not a math problem where we're at the final answer. I've done this for 5 years now, and I've learned something new every year, but I've also learned a lot that I don't know, that you kind of are figuring out along the way. So it's kind of a continuing deal. Like I say, it's also a family thing here, because I learned about all this stuff. I think the 2 godfathers of early adoption, Gary and Brad, I heard their story. Jim and Darcy told me what they were doing, and we started with the Calcine, and then getting to meet everybody. We've used a lot of different stuff over the years, but the nanotechnology and the Calcine, we've had success with both of them, and it's a good product, but at the same time, like I say, we have all the big companies, and they brought out different soil guys and plant guys, and you guys have used the same people, but of all the people that I've met everywhere, when we're talking about biology stuff, of all the guys I've met, there's nobody better in the country than Steve, and I mean that. He knows everything, and there's no better soil health guy than Tom, right? These are absolute top in their industry, and the guy that makes the Calcine back here, Sean. These guys come out in the spring, and we've looked at different things, and we've walked in the fields, and I know it seems complicated, there's so many different things here in the technology and the math, there's a lot to it, but everyone always asks me, well, what do you do, what's the one thing I can try? And I tell them, just pick one thing the first year, one of the nano products, the Nano Pro, the Nano K on sugar beets, Calcine if you have salty soils, and bring these guys out here. They'll look at the one thing you're doing, they'll take soil samples, tissue samples, they'll come back and talk to you about it. Everybody that's done it has told me that it's increased their bottom line, they've made money, and you learn so much from it too. And so, like I say, it's a good product. Jim and Darcy are some of the nicest people you meet, and help you out. Like I say, the guys that are right here, I think, we're pretty lucky, because there's nobody better that knows soil and health stuff like Tom. There's nobody better that knows biologicals like them, and Sean and Jim and Darcy are some of the best people. Like I say, they're kind of the resource. So like I say, it sounds complicated, but you call these guys too, and it's timing and everything in this area is important. And I've never not called one of these guys, or Jim or Darcy or Sean, and they haven't answered the phone and talked me through something, what time sensitive everything is. And so like I say, their number is on there. If you just take one thing, try one thing the first year, and you'll expand on it over the time. But everybody that I've talked to, it's never not worked for them. So like I say, these are the product is the thing, but these guys here are also the answer to it. So that would be my 2 cents, I guess.
Thank you. We didn't pay them either. We did buy them dinner last night or dinner last night, but that's about it. So
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you very much. But, the biggest thing is just this. These types of products take follow-up. Okay, these aren't just your average. I can make the same recommendation everywhere I need to go up and down the road from that standpoint. They have to be basically,